Have you ever wondered what kind of secrets are hidden behind the Vatican's guarded gates? Not just spiritual matters or ancient relics, but something far darker. In 1998, a shocking crime unfolded in the heart of the Holy See, a place where nothing like this was supposed to happen. A high-ranking officer, his wife, and a young soldier, dead. The official explanation came fast, almost too fast. But the contradictions, the missing details, and the silence that followed raised chilling questions that remain unanswered to this day. Before we dive into this unsettling story, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and that you've activated the bell. Every case we share brings you closer to the truth they don't want you to hear. And by the end of this video, you'll never see the Vatican the same way again. Lukas Thorne joined the Vatican Guard at the age of 20, full of pride and a quiet sense of purpose. Raised in a strict Catholic household in rural Switzerland, he believed the Guard would give him structure and meaning. His service was disciplined, precise. He was polite, rarely spoke out, and followed orders without question. But over the years, small cracks began to form. He felt overlooked, dismissed. And as new leadership stepped in, those cracks widened. Lukas, who had once walked with confidence across St. Peter's Square, now avoided eye contact and carried himself like someone constantly bracing for impact. Commander Anton Bauer had recently been promoted after decades of quiet service to the church. He was fluent in 6 languages and had served as a diplomatic advisor in multiple missions abroad. Within the Guard, he was both respected and feared. Bauer had little patience for what he considered weakness. He demanded perfection, and for some reason, Lukas became his target. Bauer denied him a service medal typically granted after 3 years, without explanation. The incident humiliated Lukas in front of his peers. What should have been a moment of honor turned into a personal disgrace. Lukas wrote long letters to his mother in Geneva, expressing frustration and confusion. In one, he described Bauer as a man who breaks others to feel taller. Still, Lukas kept his inner world sealed tight from those around him. Most of his fellow guards saw only the surface, a quiet, clean-cut young man, loyal to his post. But inside, Lukas was becoming something else, not broken, but hardened. His silence became armor, his obedience a mask, and under that mask, something was building, a bitterness, a plan. May 4th, 1998 was supposed to be just another ceremonial day in the Vatican. White robes floated across the marble, incense rose like mist. But as the evening came, behind the tall wooden door of an apartment reserved for the commander and his wife, the atmosphere was very different. The official report said it happened quickly, 3 shots, then silence. Lukas Thorne was found with a weapon in his hand, and Commander Bauer and his wife, Clara, were declared dead at the scene. But the timing, the sequence, and the strange details found later would leave investigators and the world with far more questions than answers. The Vatican wasted no time issuing a formal statement. According to their investigation, Lukas Thorne had entered Commander Bauer's apartment carrying his service weapon. After a brief argument, motive unknown, he allegedly shot both the commander and his wife, then turned the gun on himself. The incident was labeled a murder-suicide driven by personal grievance. Within 48 hours, the case was declared closed. No extended inquiry, no public trial, just 3 funerals and a wall of silence. But to many within the Vatican Guard, things didn't add up. Thorne had never shown violent tendencies. He wasn't outspoken or unstable. He was quiet but controlled. Moreover, several guards recalled seeing him in prayer the night before, kneeling alone in a chapel. Witnesses remembered his expression, blank but peaceful. One officer later said, "It didn't look like someone planning something horrible. It looked like someone preparing to disappear." The Vatican dismissed these comments as emotional responses to tragedy. The apartment itself raised questions. The bullet trajectories were inconsistent with a clean murder-suicide. The positioning of the bodies didn't match the reported sequence of events. And perhaps most troubling, Thorne had been found with a note, but only fragments were ever made in public. In it, he mentioned betrayal, humiliation, and a system that rewards cruelty in the name of order. The Vatican stated it was a personal rant from a disturbed mind. But his mother, when shown the excerpt, said, "That wasn't my son's voice. Someone else was speaking through that note." Reporters attempted to dig deeper, but access was restricted. The Vatican, a sovereign state, is not obligated to comply with outside legal standards. Documents were sealed, interviews denied. Even Thorne's personal effects were withheld from his family for months. The more they tried to uncover, the harder the doors closed. The message was clear: move on. But grief doesn't obey silence, and neither does suspicion. Helena Thorne refused to accept the official story. A nurse by profession, she had raised Lukas with discipline and empathy. She knew his handwriting, his habits, his silence. The fragments of the alleged suicide note didn't sound like him. She knew he had been under pressure, but something in her gut told her this wasn't a simple breakdown. She began writing letters to Vatican officials, to journalists, even to human rights groups. Most went unanswered, others were politely declined. The grief of a mother, they said, should not be mistaken for evidence. Still, she persisted. She tracked down former guards who had served with Lukas. Some were willing to speak, off the record. One described an internal code of fear and silence under Commander Bauer. Another hinted at deeper conflicts within the Guard, power struggles, favoritism, and disciplinary threats that were never documented. Helena documented every word, every name. But the further she went, the more resistance she faced. It wasn't just stone walls, it was warnings. Gentle ones at first, then more direct. A Vatican official once told her in a private call, "Sometimes it's better to let souls rest than to reopen wounds that run deeper than you know." The phrase haunted her. What kind of wounds existed behind those walls? She wasn't just mourning anymore. She was uncovering something, a structure built on silence, on obedience, and perhaps on sacrifice. Helena didn't want revenge. She wanted clarity and peace. But the Vatican wasn't ready to give her either. Her persistence led her to an Italian forensic specialist who agreed to review the public documents. His conclusions were startling. The time of death listed on the report didn't match the likely window based on livor mortis. The location of the gun on the floor, too far from Thorne's hand, suggested it may have been moved, and the blood patterns raised more questions than they answered. "I'm not saying it was staged," the specialist told her, "but if this were any other jurisdiction, I'd call for a full reinvestigation." Over time, new rumors surfaced. Whispers among guards spoke of a second presence in the apartment that night. One claimed he heard raised voices, more than just Lukas and Bauer. Another insisted he saw someone exit through a maintenance stairwell minutes before the bodies were discovered. None of these testimonies made it into the official investigation. Some guards were transferred shortly after speaking out. Others stopped responding to calls entirely. Fear had replaced curiosity. There were other anomalies. Surveillance footage from the corridor leading to Bauer's residence was inconclusive. A camera had allegedly been under maintenance. Records of entry logs were incomplete. A single page from the guardhouse journal went missing, dated May 4th. When asked, the Vatican responded that no foul play was found. "Sometimes machines fail," a spokesperson said, "but it was happening too often, too precisely, and always around the same event." A retired Swiss guard named Marco, a pseudonym, came forward anonymously to a journalist. He claimed Bauer had been involved in internal investigations regarding misconduct in the Guard, financial irregularities, abuse of authority, Bauer, it seems, had made enemies. Was Lukas Thorne a pawn in a bigger conflict? A scapegoat? Or worse, a loose end that needed to be tied? These were questions no one at the Vatican was willing to answer, but they refused to disappear. By now, the case had become a forbidden subject among those still in uniform. Mentioning it brought only silence or a cold stare. Lucas's name was quietly removed from service plaques. His face disappeared from official photos. The erasure was nearly complete. But truth, like smoke, finds its way through cracks. And in the deepest parts of the Vatican, beneath the marble and incense, the shadows were still moving. Publicly, the Vatican stood by its conclusions. Murder, suicide, case closed. Internally, though, efforts were made to tighten control. New psychological evaluations for guards were implemented. Senior officials conducted closed-door reviews of command behavior, but none of it addressed the central mystery. What really happened that night in Commander Bauer's apartment? Helena Thorne's requests for access to full documentation were denied again and again on grounds of state confidentiality. Years passed. Interest in the case waned. Journalists moved on, but Helena never did. In 2018, on the 20th anniversary of the tragedy, she published a personal account titled A Mother's Silence. The book didn't accuse, it asked, and in doing so, it reignited attention. Readers from around the world began questioning the Vatican's story. Some even launched independent petitions demanding transparency. The pressure began to build. Surprisingly, in 2021, a small concession came. Cardinal Pasquale Arlotti, head of internal affairs, publicly acknowledged the family's pain and granted Helena partial access to redacted files. What she read there didn't bring closure, it brought more confusion. Timeline inconsistencies, gaps in testimony, a missing ballistic analysis, and the final blow, a hand-drawn sketch of the apartment layout with an unexplained X in a room not mentioned in any report. Helena published everything she was allowed to share, but it wasn't enough. She believed someone else was there that night, that Lukas may not have pulled the trigger at all, or at least not all of them. But without full disclosure, the Vatican's version remains the only one officially recognized, and the truth, whatever it may be, remains trapped behind the walls Lukas once swore to protect. Today, the Vatican Guard continues its traditions. Ceremonial, disciplined, unyielding. Tourists take photos with the colorful uniforms. Few know the story of Lukas Thorne. Fewer dare ask. But every year, on May 4th, a single white flower appears beneath the small bronze statue near the barracks. No one knows who leaves it. Some say it's Helena, others believe it's someone from the inside, a silent tribute to a truth never told. Helena now lives in a small village outside Bern. Her health is declining, but her mind remains sharp. In interviews, she speaks calmly, never with bitterness, only conviction. "My son died wearing that uniform," she says. "They told me he dishonored it. But what if he died because he was the only one who wouldn't be quiet?" Her voice never trembles, her story never changes. And that consistency speaks louder than any official report. There are no documentaries, no Vatican memorial. But the unease lingers. Like incense in a closed chapel, the memory of that night refuses to fade. 3 lives ended, but something else began. A silent war between truth and power, and the Vatican, the most secretive place on earth, holds its silence like a shield, or perhaps like a confession. If this story made you think, leave a like. It helps this content reach more people. Subscribe for more real cases that history tried to erase, and comment below. What do you think really happened that night? Was it justice, or was it silence made permanent? Stories like this aren't told to shock, but to remind us of the price of silence. Behind every institution, no matter how sacred, there are human lives. And when questions are left unanswered, when grieving families are met with locked doors and redacted reports, something greater than justice is lost: trust. Lukas Thorne was one man, a son, a soldier, maybe more than that. And his story, whatever the full truth may be, deserved more than a sealed folder and a headline that faded.